Good Wednesday to you, everybody, in COM 785. Welcome to the second video for week 5. Ba-bang. How's everybody doing? How are you holding up? Okay, we're coming up on the residency. That will be next week. In fact, 1 week from today. Okay, very much looking forward to seeing each of you. Let's get this video started correctly. Delicious. It's actually, I've let it cool off a little bit. It's sort of a little, not iced coffee, but cool down coffee. And the second in the series of the Summer Dad t-shirts. Here, let's just adjust the camera. Let's see. There's our old friend. See if you can see that. Winnie the Pooh. And let's see. Well, I got tilted the right way. And he's staring into his cup of coffee. And the caption is, "Hello, darkness, my old friend." That's me on any given morning. Although, and let me encourage you to try something. In the morning, I don't do added sugars and things. They're really not good for us. We'll get to the material, trust me. They're bad for our insulin levels. So I don't add sugar to my foods. In fact, I rarely have sugar. Even if I have chocolate, I have like the 90% cacao chocolate that has very, very little sugar in it. So I don't add it into my coffee. Instead of sugar, now hear me out, try this. Try in your cup of coffee adding one tablespoon of butter. And good butter. Salted actually is what I prefer. And then leave the coffee black. All right. The fat in the butter, boom, stimulates your neural processes in the morning. It actually helps deliver the caffeine more effectively. And, contrary to what you might think, we don't get fat from eating animal fat. We get fat from insulin resistance, and that happens when we produce a lot of insulin, which happens when we eat highly processed carbohydrates, which, as far as the body is concerned, are exactly the same as sugars. So there's my dietary advice for the video. Okay. All right. So this week, today is Wednesday, I will be grading and getting back to you. Since they were due Monday, I give you a little extra time. I'll have them back to you by probably close of Saturday. Your essays, your essay number 2. All right. Now, coming up, since we're going to be in residence the week of the 12th, all right, I will assign readings that I want you to jump into that we'll talk about when we get there. And we're there on the 15th and the 16th. But I will assign, the questions that I will assign will be things that we will discuss while we're in residency. So if you come with your answers prepared, and then you can put them into Blackboard later, that will be just fine. Okay. That being said, for essay number 2, so the residency week will count as essay number 3. But for essay number 2, there's still a handful of you from which I have no work. Come on, guys. I think I how did I put it with the books? When you're in the role of a student, doing the assigned work is your job. So do your job. All right. I just, unless you made arrangements with me, and there's one person, all right, that had a death in the family that is now assisting another family member with the funeral, an elderly person. And okay, these things happen once in a while, and that's how they should be used. Okay, so this person made arrangements with me, right? But if you didn't, then I'm not going to give you credit for it. And look, for those of you who've had me as an instructor or heard about me and been around me, it's nothing but love. from me to you. All right. I am here to help you in any way that I can develop along your trajectory as a communication professional, both in the material that I give you, in the experience that I bring to what we do, because I've been in and around this business for a long time, and this is the important part, in the expectations that I lay down for you, because I lay them down not because I'm mad or I'm grumpy. See, can anybody that wears Winnie the Pooh on his t-shirt be a grumpy guy? No, they cannot. But because this is what the market will demand of you. Within communication, you'll be forgiven, and strategic communication, you'll be forgiven for messages that didn't like stick hard on the wall. There's not exactly a science as you're going to read in this week's readings. Especially the Heineken scale, that there's some poking around to try to okay, does this work? Does that work? Okay. So if a message, doesn't damage the company or whatever organization that you're with, and that's on the lowest level of that scale. All right. And you're anywhere above, okay, you can continue on in your work. If you miss deadlines, you will be shown the door like that. Develop the habit of not missing deadlines. That's just what you got to do. And the good news is there is a substantial living to be made working in strategic communication out and about. Now, some of you want to go on and work in academics, and you might be there already. That's fantastic. Thumbs up. The way the market goes, however, most of you will not end up in academics because it's just the market. And those that do, you'll find that the market is not, it's not the roaring 20s. It's not super strong. And it may not be able to help you make ends meet. And you may, likely, that you're going to have to hang out your shingle and put your skill sets to work as a strategic communicator. And the good news is, again, there's a lot of work out there and there's good money to be made. But deadline, bloody deadline. You've got to drill that into your head. And this is, and I don't want to sound like the lecturing lecturer, but really, this isn't this is not my responsibility to keep chasing after you for your assignments. Any organization that you go to work for, they're not going to chase after you for deadline. All right. They're going to can you. Okay. So that's why I'm not going to give you points. All right. Because I'm here to help you in any way that I can become the best communication professional that you can. And part of that is getting you to get yourself accustomed to the demands of the marketplace. All right. So you got to get that stuff in. Okay. So for essay number 2, all right, I will be grading them for this, grading them throughout this week. I'll be looking to see if you clearly use the communication matrix. I mean, if I can at a glance. And by the way, it's okay to label the categories. You can say background section. You can say situation analysis. You can say, core problem opportunity. If you remember from the video last time, that this strategic communication matrix that you find in your text is the communication equivalent of a SWOT analysis that's done in business. And the two are almost interchangeable. All right. You take a look at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And in fact, for the discussion board this week, all right, in Van Ruler, good Dutch name, et al., they are going to discuss, if you're doing PR or if you're doing marketing, how do you decide where to start and what idea to pitch? All right. And that section is really small. It's only a few pages in that particular book. Where do I have mine? Around here somewhere. Yeah, here it is. Makes an important point. All right. It's not unlike being in the customer service business. The number one person in the equation is the customer. The number one person in the equation for your communication work is the person receiving the communication that you're putting together. So you'll read in Van Ruler that they're saying, okay, you need to take stock of the external environment. What's going on? What are the trends? What's the political climate of the day? And one of the ways that you can do that that's really useful is to put together a risk matrix. Now, if you've never seen one of these, and I'm not going to describe it to you here, you can look them up online. I've used them in a whole bunch of scenarios, both with companies that I've worked for and just, within my own household for my kids. I mean, I use, and I'm not like, okay, here's your spreadsheet, kids. I mean, I'm not that kind of dad, but the same pattern. For instance, I spent a lot of time backpacking and doing what really is better described as deep wilderness trekking. I mean, we like to get way out there, hundreds of miles and days away from anything or anybody. Why? I'm just a weird guy like that. Okay. And I was introducing my sons. I have 3 of them to this activity. Some of them have taken to it more than others, and that's okay. Everybody, does their own thing. But I had one son who was interested, but he was very worried about things he might encounter in the wilderness. And I said, well, okay. And so tell me what you're worried about. Well, what about bears, and what about snakes, and what about lightning and mosquitoes, and this list kind of going to go on and on. And his response was to take. He wanted to take all of this stuff to deal with the what ifs of those things. Well, one of the tricks of backpacking is how much can you carry to, that you're not like got 100 pounds on your back and still get to where you want to go. You have to carry a certain amount of food because you burn a lot of calories when you're out on the trail, anywhere from 5,000 to 8,000 calories a day if it's real strenuous hiking. And so you have to carry the calories. And it's a weird equation because the more you hike, the less, in terms of strenuous up and down mountains, the less weight you want to carry. But the more strenuous the hike, the more calories you need, so the more food you have to carry. So you're trying to get this balance right, okay? And in his case, he wanted all of this extra equipment, all this extra stuff. So I sat him down and in just with pencil and a piece of paper, and I drew out a risk matrix. And I said, okay, what are the odds of you encountering the threat? And if you do, what are the odds of you falling victim to the threat? And if you do, what's the consequence? So, for example, things like snakes, they're really low on the possibility for encountering. In fact, I hiked literally thousands of miles through all sorts of terrain and on many different continents. I've had the great privilege to hike many of the great mountain ranges of the world, the Pyrenees, which is between France and Spain, the Apennines, which run up and down Italy, the Alps, the Zagros, which is a mountain range that runs between Iraq, Turkey, and Iran, the Rockies, on and on and on. In terms, the number of poisonous snakes that I've seen, I used to hike the deserts in Utah. I could probably count the number on one hand with a couple of fingers to spare. So the risk is really low. So it doesn't make sense to carry equipment for that stuff. So these are ways, just in sort of a day-to-day, you can use risk matrix. And these things are extremely useful when you're trying to explain to a client what it is they ought to do. Because it might surprise you if maybe you have worked this already, you have this experience, or you will encounter it perhaps when you do. People tend to they make decisions from the anecdotal. They start with the small, and then there's this decision cone that spreads out from there, saying, well, this one thing happened, and therefore all of this has to be the response. And when it comes to communication, that's not a good strategy, okay? So the exercise last week, the essay is, I'm asking, you're in effect doing it twice, and this one though in a much shorter form. All right, that the communication matrix is a more expanded version of the risk matrix. All right. So again, if you don't know what this is extremely useful for you to have and sort of have up here in your head. Okay. So I'll be grading through those today. I'll be looking for, again, you can even be as straightforward as saying these are the background issues. This is the situation analysis. These are the core problems, the opportunities. I did not set this, and some of you emailed me saying, does it have to still score an 8.7 on the FK scale? No. This would be an internal document that you would produce for an organization. This would not be something external, that the public has to read. Okay, so I'll be looking for, number one, how clearly you identify each of the sections, and then number two, have you done some research? Don't just throw stuff at the wall. Go, let's see if this sticks. How can we help DeSantis? Well, maybe maybe he holds a torchlight rally in which they burn books. It's like, come on, something that's within the ballpark of the real. All right, and then of course you're writing. You've got to pay very close and crucial attention to your writing. Okay, so those by the end of the week. All right, I know that I talked to you in the other video about the material that you read. I want to say a little bit to you about the questions for this week. And I have also extended the deadline for these questions through the Monday, because there's Monday to Monday. And then that'll take us into residency week. And so although Monday is the 12th and we don't meet until the 15th, okay, use those 2 days leading up to residency. Okay. All right. I'm sorry, I just got this little tickle in my nose. It just won't leave me alone. Okay. So the first question that I've asked you to tackle is the proposed story archetypes, by Booker. You're going to read this in Wilson et al. Right now, here too. Where's my copy? All right. If you're not familiar with this author's work, all right, Christopher Booker, and you're in the communication business, and especially if you have an interest in PR marketing or the not-for-profit sector, I encourage you strongly. This is a book that you're going to want to pick up. Now, it's got some heft to it. You're not going to read it in an afternoon. All right. It's one of these books that it's not required that you read it front to back. You can read the sections that are dedicated to each of the story archetypes, and you can skip forward and back. Part one is overcoming the monster, and then you get into rags to riches and the quest, and part two, part three, part four. Okay. One of the things that I found in my experience in communication that stumps people with whom I'm in a room, and used to stump me, was, all right, we've got to get a PR statement out there. We've got to do some marketing. And by the way, if you haven't sort of caught on to this, PR is you're presenting, you're communicating an idea. Marketing is you're also communicating the idea, but you're selling it. Not-for-profit work, as we'll discuss, and I've got a lecture on the not-for-profit sector for you when we come into residency, because it's its own unique beast that I think is terribly misunderstood. While marketing, you are selling it. Not-for-profit, you are selling it, but in a very different model than the traditional take my money, here's your goods. I'll explain that when we get into residency. All right. But one of the things that I found that stumps people and used to stump me was, where do we start in telling the story of this thing? And, honestly, it doesn't matter what the thing is. If it's a pen, or if it's an organization or a fund drive, all stories can be reduced to these 7 basic plots. And if you start with an understanding of how these 7 basic plots play out, and this is where having Christopher Booker's work is so important. If you have an understanding of how, say, the monster plays out, the movie Jaws is a good example of the monster, and it's very much in parallel with Steven Spielberg's, and I think what was the author's name? Peter Scheller or something that wrote the book, and Steven Spielberg did the film. The movie Jaws is very much in parallel to the book Beowulf, right? If you're familiar with that, all right. That is, there's a monster that is terrorizing a community, and Peter Benchley, sorry, just came to me, and then a hero shows up. Now, in the case of Beowulf, he's a very forward-leaning hero. In the case of Jaws, he is not. He's he's the oceanographer Hooper, but he is eclipsed by the other hero who's very forward-leaning, and that is Quinn. I think it's Quinn, in the film, who is very, very much like and that's the Robert Shaw character. He is Beowulf. All right. He's fought these beasts before, and he's going to rid the kingdom, the town, of this terrible beast. And like Beowulf, the character of Quint pays the ultimate price. So once you learn how these plots typically unfold, all right, you will have like a golden ticket to write any story about anything for any audience that you need. Now, the trick will be which of these plots is best suited for the story that you want to tell. All right, that's where the artistry comes in. So, for this week, what I've asked you to do, and this is question number 1 in the discussion board, it's called What's the Story, is I want you to write in 750 words or less. Maybe I'll amend that, say more or less. I don't expect you to, right. Begin a story that represents one of the 7 story archetypes proposed by Booker. Okay, post the story, post the text in your response, when you create the new thread, but do not indicate the archetype to your fellow students. Now, everybody else, in evaluating the story, one of the things that I want you to do is try to guess, assign it an archetype. And I've given you an example of the beginning of a story that I wrote that will soon be published, probably June, July, in a magazine. And take a read through that. And as part of your response to this question, I want you to take a stab at it. What archetype do you think I am pitching at in writing this story? And I think the beginning here is like 200 something words. Okay. All right. So for this week, it's not an essay week. All right. But there is a longer answer. And then the other 3 questions, I've tried to keep them short. All right. These are more cut and dry. The question of, from the Van Wooler text, and asking you to explain what a risk matrix is. And then what I'd like you to do is find a PR marketing campaign. It doesn't matter what it is, but pick something that interests you. And then use the so-called Heineken creativity ladder and rank it. Where would you say it ranks? And, say a little bit about why. And then finally, because we've just started Rosen's book, somewhere around here, Anatomy of a Buzz, the first chapter is triggered. That word gets used a lot, misused a lot. What does Rosen mean by trigger? That's the work for this week. Okay. All right. Then finally, for our residency, be sure that you have part 1 of your semester project all buttoned up and ready, your group ready for presentation. Now, someone emailed me and says, hey, we don't have 3, we've got 4 in our group. Is that okay? Yeah, that's okay. But what I don't want is anybody getting left behind. So if that leaves somebody out in sort of an odd group, that's a no bueno. I'm assuming that you have all formed yourself into groups. There's a forum over in the discussion boards where you can do that, where you can communicate with each other and say, this is what we're doing. Here's who we are. Okay. And that nobody is sort of wandering around going, who am I belong to? Who am I belong to? Because you're going to show up at Virginia Beach, and then that's a problem for you. All right. And this is one of the major assignments for the semester upon which you're going to be graded. So you've got to be ready. All right. Okay, everybody. I do have an itinerary. I've got just a couple of adjustments to make with the rooms that we're in. But suffice to say, we're going to be in the communication building on campus. Since I'll do this, I'll do this itinerary. I'll send it to you digitally. I'll drop a pin into that. So if you've never been to campus before, you can just park where you're going to park and boop, click on that and find your way to the building, and then you will be there, and we'll all be there. And remember, if you're not where you're at, you are not where it's at. Sorry for that. Okay, everybody. If you have any questions, if you have any concerns, please email me. Oh, yeah, there's been a couple of you who've asked about a remote component for this. And, I'm sorry that this is built into the program. This is not the residency portion to the class is not something that I build into the class. It's built into your DSC program. So no, there is no remote component for it. And so if you're not there, then you don't get the points. All right. And that's built in there. It's good for us all to show up and be together. This is how we build the esprit de corps, and we become a cohesive cohort. We're going to help each other, and that means me. I've gone on to help and work with professionally people that finish at Regent. We are here to support each other. So take the time. Yes, I know you have to spend the money. I understand, but make sure that you get there. Okay, everybody, thank you so very, very much. Have a great rest of the week. I will see you on Blackboard as I grade your essays. God bless. Bye-bye.